and some slang and swag. Like, what else do you think they can teach you?
They can add to my bag. Honestly, there's some new things. Paige did a little like in and out and like hook layup in practice, and I was like, I'm gonna try that and I'm gonna add that to the bag. We talked about Caitlin's range and being able to do that off the dribble, so I want to get better off the dribble. So those are the few things. Sonia was there, Citron was there, and her ability to create space off of the pull-up is really cool. So there's little tidbits you can always get from somebody's game, no matter what age they are.
I love that.
That right there is not what anyone expected from Chelsea Gray, a veteran point guard, championship pedigree, part of the old guard that's been accused of gatekeeping the league, and she just said she wants to learn from Caitlin Clark. Not tolerate her, not acknowledge her success begrudgingly, actually study her game and add elements to her own bag. The hook layup, the off-the-dribble range, the ability to create space on pull-ups. This is significant because it represents a shift we haven't seen from many established players.
See, that's cool because most of the time, these older players, the old guard, if that's what they're called, if you will, they have nothing good.
Speaking of that young talent,
They usually have nothing good to say about the young players. It's always a bunch of hate and all this other stuff. You look at the first comment, I love her humility. I wish she did more interviews like this to really show her more. And I agree. I definitely wasn't expecting this. Look, everybody.
Notice what she said about Paige Bueckers, too. Chelsea Gray is actively watching the young generation and identifying specific skills she can incorporate. That's the mindset of someone who understands the game is evolving. But here's the tension. While Chelsea Gray is showing this kind of openness and respect toward the rookies, the league itself is heading toward a potential work stoppage that could prevent fans from seeing any of these players in 2026. The CBA negotiations have completely broken down, and the timeline reveals just how badly the Players Association miscalculated their leverage.
Just continue. Now, I see a lot of media trying to spin the narrative, talking about the league might now realize the players have the leverage. Absolutely wrong. You see the unrivaled ratings? That's not a good look. That ain't leverage. That's not leverage. Y'all giving them more power. Y'all really just showing that y'all ain't nothing without Caitlin Clark. That's really what it's showing. Y'all can't pull no numbers without CC. That's what it's showing. Here it says, on the eve of the WNBA collective bargaining agreement deadline, Women's National Basketball Players Association.
Let's establish the facts here. The WNBA and the Women's National Basketball Players Association have been at an impasse for more than 14 months. The players opted out of the current CBA back in November 2023, betting that the league's growth and increased visibility would give them negotiating power. They've been pushing for a $10.5 million salary cap and 30% revenue sharing. The owners countered with $1.3 million and 15%, plus comprehensive benefits, including housing stipends, full pay during pregnancy and maternity leave, and expanded healthcare coverage. Now here's where it gets messy. The deadline was midnight on Friday, January 31st, 2025. Neither side offered an extension, and according to multiple sources, the owners stopped responding to the players' latest proposals weeks ago. They left them on red. That's not a negotiating tactic, that's a statement.
Place, man. These ladies, to me, it seems like they don't know what they're doing. The WNBA and Women's National Basketball Players Association remain at an impasse for more than 14 months since players initially opted out of the current CBA, with salary and revenue sharing structure and player benefits being some of the overarching sticking points. Some players at Unrivaled expressed frustration, but not surprised at the state of the negotiations this week. Not good, not bad, Rose guard Chelsea Gray said. Not as good as we hoped at this point. It's a battle. Laces forward, Alyssa Thomas added. It's a lot of work to be done. Ask about her confidence heading into Friday.
Brianna Stewart is trying to frame this as business as usual. We're going to continue to negotiate in good faith, she says. But that phrasing is revealing because, just weeks earlier, the Players Association was publicly complaining about the state of negotiations, and the league had to issue a statement contradicting their characterization. The owners essentially said, "We've been negotiating in good faith this entire time. You're the ones misrepresenting the process, and now we're past the deadline." The league enters what's called a status quo period, where business operates as usual while negotiations continue. But make no mistake, this is the precursor to a lockout. The owners don't have to formally announce a lockout to effectively implement one. They can simply restrict facility access, shut down training staff availability, and cut off resources. That's what's coming next.
Night CBA deadline. Phantom guard and WNBPA Vice President Kelsey Plum briefly paused before letting out a titter. Sources confirm that neither the WNBA nor the Players Union offered an extension to the current CBA, which is set to expire at midnight Friday. So, I mean, it is what it is, man. It's a wrap. The owners did not entertain the last proposal y'all sent. Y'all keep sending in these proposals for $10.5 million and 30%. They've made it very clear to y'all. They feel like they've gave y'all a good and fair offer. They're offering $1.3 million, 15%, and all this other stuff. Listen, housing, cars, you get pregnant.
Listen to Chelsea Gray's response when asked about the negotiations. Not good, not bad. That's diplomat. Speak for this is a disaster, but I can't say that on camera. Kelsey Plum, who's a vice president of the Players Association, literally paused before letting out an uncomfortable laugh when asked about her confidence heading into the deadline. That pause tells you everything. They know they overplayed their hand. Here's what the Players Association didn't account for: the unrivaled ratings. The new 3-on-3 league that was supposed to demonstrate the WNBA's star power and give players leverage just proved the opposite. Without Caitlin Clark, the viewership numbers are abysmal compared to what the WNBA polled during the regular season. Opening night for Unrivaled drew a fraction of what a random Tuesday night fever game generated. That's not leverage. That's evidence that the league's recent growth is more concentrated than the players wanted to believe.
Strikes midnight Friday, the league will enter a period of status quo or operate business as usual while the sides continue to hash out a new deal. In the meantime, though, potential work stoppage remains on the table. The WNBA is not considering a league initial lockout, sources told the Post, but players have been bracing for a potential work stoppage since negotiations began. Now, they can say they're not planning on a work stoppage, but they already locking their asses out. They already stopped responding to y'all. They're not playing games with y'all. This is why the WNBA players are already getting the facilities set up so that they can train and get treatment and all of this once the WNBA owners don't allow them in the facilities anymore.
The Players Union has been preparing for this. They've been setting up training facilities in multiple states and even in Europe, so players can continue working out and receiving treatment when the WNBA facilities get locked. That's not the behavior of a group confident in their negotiating position. That's contingency planning for a worst-case scenario they now realize is likely. And think about the timing. The 2025 season is supposed to start in May. We're now in February with no deal. Training camps typically begin in late April. If there's no agreement by March, we're looking at a delayed season at minimum and potentially no season at all. The players opted out in November 2023, thinking they had all the leverage in the world. 16 months later, they're watching the owners ignore their texts while unrivaled ratings prove the league's growth was more about one player than a rising tide lifting all boats.
Because that's what's next. That's what's going to happen next. You're going to hear WNBA owners are not allowing the players in the facilities to use the equipment, training staff, recovery, all of that stuff. That's what you're going to hear next, which is why the WNBPA is getting these stations set up in the United States and all these different states, and even in Europe or Spain, in Spain, where players can train and get treatment and all of that, because they won't be able to use WNBA facilities. The lockout is happening. Pardon me. The lockout is happening. So it just is what it is. And you know, it is what it is at this point. So brace yourselves, and that's just what it is. Get down.
Here's what makes this particularly complicated. The owners aren't wrong about their financial position. The WNBA has lost money every year of its existence. The league is subsidized by the NBA. And while revenue has grown significantly, we're talking about growth from a very small base. A 30% revenue share sounds reasonable until you look at the actual numbers and realize the league still isn't profitable. The players want to be paid like the NBA, but the revenue simply isn't there to support those salaries. At the same time, the players have a legitimate grievance. They've watched the league's visibility explode, seen arenas sell out, and witnessed record television ratings. They know their value has increased dramatically. The problem is they're conflating visibility with profitability, and those are two very different things. You can have record ratings and still lose money if your operating costs exceed your revenue. That's basic economics. The owners offered $1.3 million for the salary cap. That's not an insult. That's a reflection of what the league can actually afford while maintaining financial stability. The 15% revenue share is actually generous when you consider the league's financial history and the additional benefits, the housing stipends, the pregnancy and maternity provisions. Those represent real money and real value that the players seem to be dismissing. But the Players Association pushed for $10.5 million and 30%. That's not a negotiating position, that's a fantasy number. And when the owners didn't take it seriously, when they stopped responding to proposals that were completely disconnected from financial reality, the players suddenly found themselves with no leverage and no plan B. Now we're looking at a potential work stoppage in a league that just had its best year ever. Caitlin Clark brought millions of new fans to the WNBA. Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, the entire rookie class elevated the profile of the league, and instead of capitalizing on that momentum, instead of finding a reasonable middle ground that keeps the games happening, we're heading toward a scenario where those new fans might just walk away. Because here's the thing about casual fans, they're casual, they showed up for Caitlin Clark and the excitement of the 2024 season. If there's no 2025 season, if the league goes dark right when it had everyone's attention, those fans aren't going to wait around. They'll move on to something else. And when the league comes back, if it comes back, rebuilding that audience will be exponentially harder than maintaining it. The Players Association seems to believe they can pressure the owners by threatening a work stoppage, but the unrivaled ratings just prove that most of these players don't have individual leverage. The league's growth was concentrated around a few stars, primarily Caitlin Clark, and the rest of the players benefited from that rising tide. Now they're trying to negotiate as if they all have equal star power, and the market is showing them that's not true. Chelsea Gray praising Caitlin Clark and wanting to learn from her game, that's the right approach. That's a veteran recognizing talent and being secure enough to acknowledge it, but the Players Association's approach to these CBA negotiations is the opposite of that. It's insecurity masked as confidence, demands without leverage, and a fundamental misunderstanding of their actual bargaining position. The owners have the financial data. They know what the league can afford. They made an offer they believe is fair and sustainable, and when the players kept coming back with proposals that ignored financial reality, the owners stopped engaging. That's not disrespect. That's a business decision. You don't negotiate with someone who refuses to acknowledge basic economic facts. So where does this leave us? The deadline passed, no extension. The league enters status quo, but that's temporary. Facility lockouts are coming, training camp delays are coming, and if the players don't significantly adjust their demands, we're looking at a canceled season right when the WNBA had finally broken through to mainstream relevance. The question is whether the Players Association will recognize their miscalculation in time to salvage this. Whether they'll look at the unrivaled ratings, look at the owners' silence, and realize they need to come back with a realistic proposal. Because right now, they're playing chicken with the most successful season in league history, and the owners are showing zero signs of blinking. Chelsea Gray gets it. She sees the talent in the young players and wants to incorporate it into her game. That's growth. That's adaptation. The Players Association needs to show that same willingness to adapt, to recognize when their initial strategy isn't working, and to adjust before they sacrifice an entire season. Because if they don't, all the momentum from 2024, all the new fans, all the increased visibility, it evaporates. And rebuilding that will take years if it's even possible at all.